So there's three common causes of back pain, and they generally can be attributed to about 95% of the problems that we see in physical therapy or in general in orthopedics with back pain. The number one cause is some kind of muscle strain or muscle problem or a muscle injury. It can be something that just happened recently, it can be something that's chronic. But basically what's happening is that you did something, so you bent over wrong, you picked something up that was heavy, you sat too long, you were too active, you ran for a long time, whatever it might be, and something causes a muscle in your back to get irritated. It gets irritated, it gets tight, it gets sore, and that'll generally produce the symptoms of tightness or stiffness, some achiness and soreness in your back. Sometimes if that pressure, that tightness gets enough, it'll start to increase and give you more of a sharp pain. But basically what happens is that there's a lot of muscles in your back, and we could go into all the different names of them, etc., but just understand there's a lot of muscles in your back. And when those muscles aren't in balance with each other, or when those muscles are overworked, or when they're not stretched out enough, they're not loose enough to do the activity that you're doing, those muscles, instead of stretching, they actually create more pressure down through the spine. And that pressure is what starts to cause the increased pain, the stiffness, the tightness, the soreness, etc. So when muscle is the cause of your problem, you will notice that it feels better to stay still, because muscle is responsible for three things. The first thing that muscles in your back are responsible for is maintaining alignment and the curve of your spine. So when we talk about the curve of your spine, we're looking for a C curve in your spine. And the muscles are responsible for maintaining that C curve in your low back. Well, when muscle isn't doing a good job, it'll have a hard time maintaining that curve. And so then the alignment of things starts to get out of whack. If you've ever had a muscle problem in your back, you feel a hard time standing up straight, or when you do stand up out of a chair, you have a hard time getting up straight because the alignment is a factor. The second thing that a muscle does is that the muscles on the side, they absorb impact away from the spine. So as you're walking and you're moving and you're doing things, it keeps that pressure from ending up at the disc or pressure on the nerve, etc. So the muscle is an absorber of impact, an absorber of stress and strain to the spine itself. And the third thing that a muscle finally does is it creates movement. So as you bend over, or as you bend backwards, or you reach up overhead, those muscles are creating that movement for you. So again, when a muscle can't do those things because it's been injured, it feels better to stay still. That's where the old adage of bed rest is the best thing for a back problem comes into play. And it's actually one of the worst things you could do, but when a muscle is injured, it feels better if it doesn't move or it doesn't have to do anything. So the second cause of a back problem is something called a sacroiliac joint dysfunction, or a sacroiliac dysfunction. The sacroiliac joint is the junction between your pelvis here and your tailbone. So the sacroiliac joint is this junction right in here where those two bones come together. Now typically what you want to see is that when you bend and when you move, the spine is what's doing the movement. So you would bend over and this curve in your back would reverse and your pelvis wouldn't have to move a whole lot. But what's happening in an SI dysfunction is that for some reason, whether it be because the curve in your spine isn't the way that it should be, or the alignment of your spine isn't the way that it should be, or as we just talked about, the muscles in your spine are irritated, what starts to happen is when you bend over, your spine can't move, and so now your pelvis has to start to move. And so your pelvis starts to move and it creates this friction between those two bones. And that's really what starts to cause that pain and that discomfort. It'll present itself as a little bit more of a sharper pain. It's generally localized right in your tailbone. A lot of times people will describe pain that's in their groin or in the front of the pelvis as well, because as that is moving, as that pelvis is moving, it's creating pressure in along your groin and in along the front side of your pelvis as well. But that comes from the fact that your spine isn't in the alignment that it should be, and it's not being able to move the way that it should be. So something else has to start moving more to make up for it. The third common cause of back problems is really disc problems. So the discs are the cushions that sit in between the vertebrae and your spine. Their job is to create space in between the vertebrae so that the nerve has space to come out of. Now there's really three things that can happen when we're talking about disc problems. The first thing is that a disc can become degenerative. So the disc gets smaller, it just shrinks in size as we age. Now that is expected, that is okay, but it's not okay for you to have symptoms because that's happening. And so what happens as that disc is shrinking in size, the space or the opening for the nerve is getting less. And so you can start to have problems with back pain and leg pain associated with that as well. The second cause for disc problems is what would be called a bulge in the disc. So the disc is like a jelly donut. There's fluid in the center of that disc. Well, when the disc starts to have too much pressure on it, most commonly because of repetitive injuries to the spine, or muscular injuries that are causing pressure down through the spine, you'll end up with this disc that starts to bulge out to the side. Well, that bulge can start to put some pressure onto the nerve and give you those symptoms as well. And the third thing that can progress to is a bulging disc can actually turn into a ruptured disc. So because the pressure continues on that disc, a hole would actually form, kind of like a cut in your skin, and now it would leak fluid out, which would constantly be putting pressure on the nerve. But in any case, back problems related to discs usually have back pain, but they will also have some semblance of symptoms down into a part of your leg as well, because again, the nerve is getting pinched on, and that nerve runs a specific line down a part of your leg. So not only will you have back pain, but you'll have leg symptoms as well, and those leg symptoms could be numbness and tingle, weakness, or pain as well. Now with a disc issue, unlike muscular and sacroiliac issues that are worse with movement, a disc issue is actually worse when you're sitting still, because that pressure builds up when you're immobile. So like in bed at night where the pressure isn't being relieved, disc problems will actually cause you more symptoms with either immobility or with way too long of a prolonged period of mobility. So that's kind of how you would differentiate. But typically a back problem will start out as a muscular problem. It starts out, I hurt my back maybe 10 years ago. I was lifting a bag of mulch or I was doing something and I had this tightness and soreness in my back. It lasted for a couple of days and it went away. Well, that's kind of a warning sign that some things are going on. So just imagine that muscles in your back are like the check engine light that comes on in your car. That light comes on and what do? We immediately take it to go get it checked out. Well, that warning light of the muscle soreness is the warning sign that some things are beginning to change. You're getting a change in the alignment, you're getting a change in the shock absorption, the spine isn't doing what it's supposed to do, and so it starts to spread off into other areas. And like I said, the next thing that can happen is that you start to develop some sacroiliac joint problems or some disc problems because that pressure has been there for too long. So the number one way to treat and address on a long-term and short-term basis back problems is with physical therapy. It's been proven in thousands of studies and it's well known across the United States. But the number one way to handle back problems is through physical therapy. So here at Loudon Sports Therapy Center, our expert physical therapists are all expertly trained in handling low back problems. Really, the way that starts is with a full assessment. Somebody's got to take a look at what your problem is and how you move and what's causing the symptoms. Because just like that check engine light, there could be 1,000 reasons for what's going on. It could have originally started out as a muscle problem, but now it's beginning to exhibit some disc symptoms. And each of those things need to be addressed through some treatment. So basically, through a full comprehensive evaluation, we can figure out what are all of the things that are causing that back problem. Get you started on a regimen of things that's going to address them so that number one, you start feeling better right away, but more importantly, number two, we address this problem before it has a chance to progress into something else. Obviously, the easiest way to do that is when it's a muscular problem. A lot of times people don't handle that problem right up front. They'll wait until it starts to cause some symptoms down the leg. Now that check engine light's been on and it's stayed on for a couple of years or a couple of months at that point. But regardless, we can still handle all of those issues. The number one way that physical therapy is successful in handling back problems is to manually address the symptoms that we find, the findings that we find. And what that means is manually, through some mobilization and manipulation techniques and hands-on techniques, get the alignment of the spine back to where it needs to be. Get the control and the support of the spine such that the curves are where they need to be. Get the muscles to be longer and looser. So yes, that's some exercise, but it's also some manual techniques and some other techniques that go into that as well, to getting those muscles to relieve the pressure on the spine, open up the spaces, get the pressure off of the nerve. Yes, get you feeling better, but by getting those curves back to where they need to be, the alignment back to where it needs to be, now it makes sure that this problem is not something that's more likely to occur in the future or that's going to come back and cause you much greater problems in the future. So what you need to do if you've got some back problems now, there's a link here, or you can call the office at the number that's listed as well. Click on that, we'll get you scheduled for an evaluation and get things taken care of. At the same time, if you're not having problems right now, but you had some back stiffness or soreness or some problems a couple of months ago, that's that warning sign that's going on. Even though you're not having symptoms right now, we can get that problem under control and make sure that you know what you should and shouldn't be doing so that that doesn't become an issue for you in the future and keep it from progressing into something else. But again, if you're having some problems right now, click on that link below. We can get you scheduled for an evaluation. We can figure out exactly what's causing your back problems, get things under control, and get you feeling better and long-term in a much better shape.